Welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybon, joined as always by my guy, Sean Kerner. And today is our annual props episode. We're going to talk all about player props. Sean, excited for this one, right?
Yes, like I say every year, this is my favorite off-season pod. Can't wait to talk about some player props.
Oh yeah. So we're gonna go through. We're going to start with quarterback props, then go through running back props that we like, then wide receiver, tight end props to close it out. So we'll have a bunch of these. And this podcast sponsored by Prize Picks. So we will use the Prize Picks lines. All right, Sean, start us off. Give me a prop you like for QBs.
So I'm going with Jameis Winston under 4,200 passing yards, and I'll throw in the under 23 and a half passing touchdowns as well. I think that, when it comes to Jameis Winston, he has a wide range of outcomes this year. He could end up playing all 17 games, have a career year, and just fly over these totals, right? But he also has a really low floor. So I think his median should be much lower. He's been announced as the week 1 starter. We know that. But even though he's starting, Taysom Hill's still going to be involved in the offense, especially around the goal line. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I like his under on his passing touchdowns as well. But any given week, I think Taysom Hill could take over this offense. And even if Winston were to start, 10 plus games, he doesn't have the greatest wide receiver depth chart or even tight end depth chart now that Troutman's hurt. So I think Winston has an uphill battle to clear these numbers. So, I would set this line maybe closer to 3,800 passing yards and maybe 21 and a half passing touchdowns, just to factor in, the extreme floor that Winston has. So I love the under for both of these.
How many starts are you projecting Jameis Winston to make as opposed to Taysom Hill this year?
So I have, Taysom Hill is going to technically play in 17 games. That's why he's kind of tricky to project. But I have Winston projected to start 13 games, but it's one of those projections where how can you feel good about it one way or the other? So it's kind of where I've just settled. And at that projection, I have him at 3,500 passing yards. But again, would it surprise me that he, ends up throwing for 4,500 passing yards? Of course not. It's Jameis Winston, but this is a case where I think the median is much lower than the mean, or like this is almost like his ceiling. So I think that there's just so much value on these unders that the game projection itself is kind of why I like this under. He's such a fickle player to project that it does favor the under here.
Absolutely. And we tend to project median projections. When you guys see our projections on Action Network.com and the fantasy tool, those are median projections, but every player has a range of outcomes that you want to take into account. And with this situation, regardless of where you have the median at, and Prize Picks has it at 4,200 yards, but I think there's a low floor, right? Like there's the amount of the range of outcomes on the bottom side for Jameis Winston is wider and larger than it is on the top. So I agree. I think the 4,200 number is a lot closer to his ceiling, because I think the Saints still going to be a pretty good defense, still going to be a team that's going to run the ball with Alvin Kamara and Latavius, or maybe Devontae Freeman if you believe some of the camp hype. But it's going to be. I would be surprised if Jameis got over that number. So I like that one a lot. My first one is going to be Sam Darnold under 23 and a half passing touchdowns. And this is another one where we're just kind of assuming Sam Darnold's going to start every single game for Carolina. That probable, but it's never really happened for Darnold in his career. He's always either missed time. Or something like that. And then last year, remember, Carolina, they went away from Bridgewater in some games a little bit toward the end of the season. So, but more importantly, remember Bridgewater is like, hey, this team, we didn't practice situational football. They had 16 passing touchdowns last year. That's it. And for all of the receivers that kind of went off, DJ Moore, well, really just DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, but they played really well for that team to still only have 16 passing touchdowns. And now you're asking Sam Darnold to go to like essentially 1.5x that. That means he has to start every game and play better than the Sam Darnold that has played for the Jets. 17 touchdowns in 13 games in his rookie year, 19 touchdowns in 13 games his second year, just 9 touchdowns in 12 games last year. So the most recent season is the ugliest one of all. I just don't see a huge jump for Sam Darnold, especially on a team where outside of Christian McCaffrey, who's a running back, so the touchdown expectation is never going to be super high. DJ Moore's not really a red zone guy. He's 4 touchdowns, even though he's gotten nearly 1,200 yards in back-to-back years. He hasn't top 4 touchdowns. Robbie Anderson's never been a big touchdown guy. Terrace Marshall, he's a rookie, going to play in the slot. That doesn't project for a ton of touchdowns either. And then Dan Arnold's not even really a traditional tight end. I just don't see where you're getting all of these touchdowns from, even if Darnold starts every game. So this one is a few touchdowns too high for me. I'm going under 23.5 passing touchdowns for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, no, like anytime you can go against Sam Darnold, I'm not going to stop you. I do think you're underselling Terrace Marshall a little bit there. I think he will sort of be the red zone threat. But again, yeah, under 23.5 passing touchdowns, sign me up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I like Terrace Marshall as much as the next guy, but you're talking about a guy who had 9 touchdowns in 12 starts last year and a team that he's going to that had 16 touchdowns in 16 games. It's just a big regression to the mean upwards projection to get Sam Darnold there. So yeah, I am going under for him. Give me another one for quarterback, Sean.
So I'm going with Jalen Hurts over 655.5 rushing yards. I'm projecting him closer to 750. There is some uncertainty if he's going to grow as a passer this year, and I share that concern. But he won't have to clear this prop because we already know he's a really good runner, an elite rushing quarterback at that. So, rushing stats are much more predictive. This feels like will he play over under 14 games kind of prop in my opinion. So I'm taking the over here, and I would, bet this probably up to 700, maybe 720. Like I said, this is a pretty predictive stat. So that's why I'm really comfortable taking the over 655 here.
Yeah, I have him over 700 rushing yards as well. And the reason it's so predictive is because scramble rate is very, very sticky. Like a quarterback's rate of scrambling is going to be, you could have like a couple of games worth, maybe even just, 1 or 2 games worth of dropbacks. And you can get a very good idea of a quarterback's scramble rate because most quarterbacks, they either do it or they don't. So Jalen Hurts scrambled on 13.5% of his dropbacks a year ago. I have him regressing to the mean a little bit. The league average is closer to 5%, but I have him still scrambling about 11% of the time this year. So that is and the average scramble is like a pass attempt in terms of yardage. It's going to get you like 7 yards a pop, regardless of the quarterback. So yeah, I think it's a very high floor projection. The only thing that could really bomb it is if he doesn't play enough games, like you said.
Yeah, that's the concern for sure. That's why it feels like a games played prop, which there's fair concern there, but it's I would take the over 14, and that's kind of what this feels like.
He does face the Falcons in week 1, so you could get $150 right out the bat, just run around.
Start.
Yeah, I mean that game. I could see that game just being the Eagles' best offensive performance of the year. I'm very curious to see how the Falcons field a competitive defense this year. So, like the over for Jalen Hurts rushing. I'm gonna go with Aaron Rodgers under 4,550 passing yards. Aaron Rodgers had an amazing season last year. He took what he was struggling at, the year before, which they still went 13-3, but he said he used COVID to really kind of see what was going wrong the previous few years. His numbers had dipped and he came back with a vengeance. I think he did make some improvements to his mental game in terms of handling pressure and things like that. But to hit this number, he'd essentially have to average the same amount of passing yards per game as last year, about 270 yards per game, a little more actually, play all 17 games. And he would have, on top of that, he would have to, come close to that 8.2 yards per attempt average. He hadn't gone above 8 since 2014. So does he play every game? Maybe. Green Bay could be really good. Maybe he sits the last week of the season out. Maybe the yards per attempt comes down. Maybe Devontae Adams misses a few games, which would bring the prop down. But on top of that, one of the things that Rodgers changed, line of scrimmage, he made sure to take as much time as he needed to manipulate the defense. The Green Bay Packers had the slowest situation neutral pace in the league, and they were basically last in every single pace category, whether it was, leading, trailing, first, second half, whatever. They were near the bottom of the league or at the bottom of the league. So many things would have to go right for Aaron Rodgers to hit this. And these are the kind of props I love. Unders where a guy could have a very good season and still fall short of the prop, because again, Green Bay 13-3 2 years in a row, the game script might just not be necessary for Aaron Rodgers to throw for over 4,550 yards. So this one is one where you might see the name and be scared to bet the under, but I love the under here.
Yeah, I love it too. And obviously there's an extra game this year, but he hasn't gone over this total since 2011, I believe. And if you were to add, say 250 yards to every total the past 10 years, he'd still be under most of the time. So I agree. I kind of like betting against Aaron Rodgers, just pure stats this year. I think the Packers will be really good. So yeah, I think that they could run it a little bit more. So I agree with this under here.
Yeah,
and
he's 38.
Where do you have him projected right now for passing yards?
I have him at,
because I'm 100 yards less.
I'm almost 200 less. I'm at 43.62.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and honestly, 100 yards less is a big deal because there's so many more outs for the under to hit. Like you said, they could have a round one bye in the playoffs already locked up, and he sits week 18. There's so many other things that can happen for the under to hit, whereas last year was kind of a ceiling year, so he should regress somewhat this year. So yeah, I love this prop a lot.
And we should talk about this now before we move on, because it's kind of an underlying theme that I doubt a lot of other people are going to talk about or podcasts are going to talk about, but we should talk about this because it affects the player projections. And that is the league averages from last year. Last year, the NFL set an all-time scoring record at 24.8 points per game. That was 1.4 points higher than the previous high, which was 23.4 in 2013. Also 64.3 plays per game. That was up from the prior, 5 years. So that was a 5-year high. Passing, interceptions were down. Obviously holding penalties were down. So there was like a 1.1 less penalties per game. I mean, a lot of that I think was due, partly to the holding, but also the COVID situation and defenses not really being prepared. I think the lack of the crowd noise benefited the offense and impacted the defense. So do you think there could be a little bit of regression in the league wide in these offensive numbers? Because essentially almost across the board, we saw outliers in offensive production last year.
Yeah, I agree. You laid out some of the things I was going to mention, like the holding, the crowd noise, the lack of offseason for the defense. I think that, in general, the league is going to be higher scoring going forward. The league's getting more pass happy, more analytical. The quarterbacks are just getting better. There's so many good quarterbacks. So I think just the league in general will, start to score more. But like you said, I think last year was sort of extreme. So I think that, yeah, we'll see a little bit less this year, especially with the crowd noise and everything. That's going to really help, the home team. So I think that, yeah, that's a smart call where all these players might take a step back just based on kind of the league having these, extra factors going into this year.
Yeah, and it's not a huge thing, but when you're talking about these season-long props and, every 10, 20 yards, is, a little bit of an edge. Every 5 receptions is a little bit of an edge. Every like half a touchdown is an edge. I think that's important because I do have league wide, the numbers regressing just a tiny bit. Like I have completion percentage, in my projections down maybe about a 0.5%. So my reception totals, would be a tiny bit lower than last year. Same thing for touchdowns, have them down just a tiny bit from their all-time highs, because 1.4 points over your previous high, like that's an outlier. That's huge. So maybe it could continue, but we can't bank on that, especially with fans back in the stands. So definitely something to keep in mind. And I think something that makes you, if you weren't an under better before, it's something that gives you a little extra incentive to go under with some of these big numbers. All right, let's keep it going. I had Darnold under, Rodgers under, you had Winston under, and Hurts over. Give me another QB prop.
I'm going with Josh Allen under 480 rushing yards. There's 258 million reasons why the Bills probably want him to run it a little bit less going forward. They want to protect him. He took a really big step last year as a passer, so he didn't really have to run as much. You mentioned scrambling rate when it comes to quarterbacks and sort of rushing stats, and we've seen his scrambling rate drop pretty significantly every year now. As a rookie, I think it was around 12%. His second year is around 8.5%, and then last year it dropped down to like 5.5%. So we've seen, the more comfortable he is in the pocket, and with his throwing ability, he's running a bit less. Now, I think that he will still run around the red zone, so I'm still projecting him for a ton of touchdowns. I have him at 7.5 rushing touchdowns, but his rushing yards, I do have closer to 407 rushing yards right now. So I think that, this prop, I don't really see how it's going to go over. I think there's a little bit lower floor on this one. Last year, he ran for 420 rushing yards in 16 games. So I think that might be kind of the baseline going forward. So an extra game there would still put him under this number. So again, we were talking about different outs for the under hitting. Again, missing a game due to injury. Not having to play week 18 because they have a first round bye. There's so many more outs for the under hitting that if my projection is a little bit closer and I don't really see any reason for him to increase his usage there this year, I'd like the under even more. So that's why I love this pick. Under 480 yards is another great pick I like here.
Yeah, I'm at 446 in 16 and a half games. So 16 and a half games, usually my default for quarterbacks, unless something's going on there. So yeah, I have him about 35 yards under, and that's like a game's worth of rushing yards.
Yeah, that's almost a game for him. So
yeah,
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like a lot. I know to people listening, maybe who aren't used to doing some of these kind of things, or you're just listening for fantasy. I still have Allen as my QB2, but Kyler Murray is right there for me. Like they're almost tied because I think Murray's going to have a schedule that favors a little bit more shootout kind of style, whereas the Bills are going to be so good that we could see Josh Allen regress, not because he takes a step back, but just because the Bills are pretty good. And they were good last year, obviously, but something to keep in mind that I don't really have a ton of separation there between Allen and Murray, and Jackson's sitting there in fourth with Dak kind of catching up to him because there's just so many injuries in Baltimore on that offense that I don't know what exactly they're going to do, but
just run it a ton.
Yeah. But I mean, the more you run it, the more that opens a guy like Lamar Jackson up to injury. So it's kind of like, I think you have some outs for Jackson under as well. And that's why I'm actually going with the under 7.5 rushing touchdowns for him. And a lot of people may say, okay, J.K. Dobbins got hurt, they'll probably run Lamar more. But again, I just think, first of all, Dobbins was such a high efficiency runner that I think it knocks this offense down a tiny bit. Gus Edwards is good, but J.K. Dobbins was otherworldly. You already expected some regression from, what did Dobbins average? 6.0 yards per carry last year on 134 carries. So you expected some regression already, but I think you expect a little bit more now with him out for the year. So I don't know if they'll be close, to the red zone quite as much as they would, especially because you also have Marquise Brown missing time and Watkins missing time, and Bateman's going to be out to start the season. Nick Boyle just came back. So I could just see a sloppy stretch for Baltimore. But also, you look at Lamar, and he had 7 rushing touchdowns last year in 15 games, but he had touchdowns of 50, 37, and 37 as 3 of those 7. So I think that, yeah, you still expect Lamar to get some scores, but it was also a pretty big record-setting year for quarterback rushing touchdowns. So I have a lot of regression there too. So I like a lot of the unders for quarterback rushing touchdowns, but I have Lamar closer to 6, 6.5, not 7, 7.5. I just think that's the stat you see. You're going to see some regression in, for Lamar. I just think, he's been getting it real good with 7 in back-to-back years. But I don't think he sets a career high with 8 this year. So going under Lamar rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, like I have him projected 7.1 rushing touchdowns, but you mentioned it, where every half touchdown counts for, a quarterback like this. Like you said, his career high is 7 touchdowns. He's done it in back-to-back years, of course, and there's an extra game this year, but he's the kind of quarterback where I don't know where you have him projected for games played, but I have him a little bit lower than your traditional quarterback because, he is a running quarterback. So he's more prone to injury. So I'm projecting him for 16.1 games played. So that's why I'm still projecting him around 7 touchdowns. But where do you have him for games played?
Yeah, I have him at 16.5. I had him a little lower earlier when he wasn't practicing. He was on a COVID list, but I tend to leave most guys that are like healthy and, there's not something crazy at 16.5, but I think that's actually a good call. If I might make some little tweaks here and there. Like I have Dak at 16. He's one of the guys that, because there's some uncertainty there, I have a little further down. But either way, I think, if I lowered Lamar, let's see, I can do it right now. If I lower Lamar to 16 games, then his rushing touchdown total.
Probably in the 5s for you.
Yeah, it's like 5.5. So
yeah.
And again, that's not just a knock on Lamar. It's because quarterback rushing touchdowns last year were around 0.2 per game, whereas historically they've been more around, 1.125, which is like 2 per 16 games.
Yeah.
Last year they were like 3 per 16 games. And yeah, there's better scramblers in the league now. There's guys that are more athletic, but still, it's not easy to score a rushing touchdown, even if you're a quarterback. The defense tightens up in that red zones, and it's tough to break off 3 35 plus touchdown runs in a season.
And to his credit, he really doesn't take that many big hits. He's so fast that he can usually escape really big hits. But for a quarterback like him, any kind of hamstring pull or an ankle tweak, like anything, can really set him back. So it's not so much, he's just running around going to get hit hard. It's also just the soft tissue injuries, things like that. He just puts himself at such a risk, and he depends on his legs so much that any kind of injury will set him back a lot. So that's why I think a guy like him, there's so many outs for the unders that, yeah, like if you're going to attack him, you'd want to attack the unders.
And just schematically speaking as well, with the way Baltimore's receiving corps has been trending with everyone missing time and guys out of the lineup, defenses are going to be able to force Lamar to throw. They're going to be able to dedicate more resource. And especially now with J.K. Dobbins out, Lamar is the main focus of the defense and containing him. I mean, it has been before, but it just gets a little easier with what's going on in Baltimore. So yeah, a lot of outs there. Who you got we're going to do 4 each for each type of props. So which is your 4th one for QBs?
My 4th one is a fun one. I want to bank on Tua Tagovailoa having a bounce back year 2. So I'm going with over 3,900 passing yards. His rookie season was really rough. He didn't make his first start until week 8 because they had Ryan Fitzmagic. And then he was benched in game in week 11. And, we kind of know the rest from there. But, he was coming off a hip injury. It was a COVID deleted off season. It was really tough for him as a rookie. I think the offense under Chan Gailey was tailored for Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I think that, heading in this year, he's looked a lot better. I mean, I've watched every preseason snap he's played, and he looks like a brand new quarterback. It's almost like he should have sat out last season. That's how much better he looks. So that's why I'm very bullish on him this year now. And he has Jalen Waddle, who's looked great, and Will Fuller. We haven't really seen Will Fuller much, but he will be healthy for about 10 games at least. So I think he's going to bring that extra element to his game. Fuller has always made the quarterback look good, so I think that's going to help. And then Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker are still there. So I love Tua. I know you think that Jacoby Brissett might be a threat of an in-game mentioning, but I think Tua has looked good enough where I'm betting against that this year, and I love the over 3,900 yards.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's your recency bias from watching Tua destroy the Falcons backups. I know you had some action on that, and you cashed though,
Well, it's better than nothing. I obviously don't want to say I'm taking too much away from preseason, but it's better than nothing, right? I mean, he did look a lot better. And
absolutely.
That's all we can ask for with Tua. Is we know he's talented. And last year he had a lot of excuses, but this is a make or break year. You hate to say that for a second year player, but it really is. And I think he's looked a lot better than I expected.
The interesting thing to me, I mean, I usually stay away from the overs, but one thing that scares me is the Deshaun Watson trade rumors. I don't think there's a much of a chance that Watson gets traded to Miami and plays, but Miami has been right there at the top of the list with the Philadelphia Eagles as the teams that he's been rumored to. So does that factor in at all? Like, I know earlier in the offseason, we talked about kind of factoring Aaron Rodgers' potential landing spots. Like, is Watson a factor in your predictions at all at this point, or is it just moot?
It's moot because he's uncappable. I can't even think of words to describe. But in those situations, wouldn't like either Hurts or Tua now become the Texans quarterback? Like, I can't imagine there would be a trade where they're all of a sudden backing up Watson, right? Like, I don't know. Like, it seems like they would still start for somebody in those situations, right?
You would think. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa, second-year player,
it is a Texans. Well,
talented guy.
Give Watson away for free. Like, they don't even ask for either quarterback. Like,
imagine,
I don't know.
Like, it's Brissett. They'll get Brissett.
Yeah,
they'll platoon Brissett and Tyrod.
Yeah. So how can you factor that in? Obviously, that is some risk. Anytime you're taking it over for a season-long prop, it's not fun. But that's part of the fun is I want Tua to have a bounce back here, and I'm just kind of ignoring the noise with the Deshaun Watson situation, which I think you can. I think it's a low probability he's gonna play for anybody this year. So I think that something like that I'm basically ignoring on this prop.
Okay, it's not a Prize Picks prop, but I got a prop for you real quick. Over under games played this season combined 17.5. Will Fuller plus Deshaun Jackson.
Oh, Deshaun Jackson and Will Fuller
combined.
I want to root for the over, so I'm taking the over. But I think both will be around 9 or 10 games. So
that'll be an improvement for Deshaun.
That's a good line. Yeah, Deshaun, he's like what 2 games the past 3 seasons or something.
But 2-3 games. Yeah,
I want to see them play more than that, so I'm gonna take the over here. I'm gonna be a donkey and take the over.
I still can't believe that Will Fuller got suspended last year. I mean, I remember screaming it out, like, don't like label a guy injury prone. He's gonna have a great year. And then he was doing exactly what I thought he would do. And then he did exactly what everyone else thought he would do and miss games. And not because of injury, but because he was enhancing his performance so he didn't get injured.
Yeah, see, it canceled itself out. Like, that's the only reason maybe he stayed healthy. Who knows? But yeah, of course he gets suspended. So
yeah, I just hope we don't see too much Albert Wilson in Miami. I feel like I keep hearing about him in camp, and it's I'm like, oh man, it's like if we see too much of him, we know it's probably things aren't probably going well.
It's going to be way better than last year. I remember last year, didn't they have like 6 or 7 running back / wide receiver hybrids?
Lynn
Bowden, Malcolm Perry, I think, who looked pretty good in preseason.
Is he going to make the team? I don't know. I don't think I have him projected to make the team.
Who knows? But Jakeem Grant, all those low ADOT kind of guys, like Tua was dealing with that last year. Just if we can get Will Fuller to stay healthy for 10 plus games, Tua is going to crush this prop.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jalen Waddle, don't underestimate him.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that's a talent right there. That could
Yep.
change your whole your whole stat line if you're a quarterback. So
Exactly.
I'm going to round out our quarterback props with Matt Ryan. I'm going under 29 and a half passing touchdowns. So Matt Ryan would essentially need to play every game and average 1.7 touchdowns per game. He's averaged 1.6 per game or fewer in 3 of the last 4 years. He's, going to a new offensive coordinator. Obviously, there's just a lot of change. Julio Jones is gone. Remember, even when Matt Ryan had some really good years under Kyle Shanahan, that first year he struggled. You never know if Matt Ryan is going to pick up the new offense, as quick as and just kind of revert to his, crazy ceiling performances, especially now a year older, especially without Julio Jones. So I think, Matt Ryan still has some decent weapons with Ridley and Kyle Pitts, but I think there's a low floor here. And again, he would have to play every game and average more touchdowns than he's averaged with a better supporting cast in 3 of the last 4 years. So I think Ryan is being a little bit inflated here at 29 and a half. I have it a couple of touchdowns lower. So going under the 29 and a half for Matt Ryan pass touchdowns.
Yeah, I love that call. And, even though Julio left and he wasn't really a touchdown scorer at all, he didn't score 10 plus touchdowns for about a decade now. He still allowed others to score touchdowns. So I think without him there, a guy like Calvin Ridley is going to see more double teams. It's going to hurt Matt Ryan. So yeah, love the pick. Although, did you see Kyle, speaking of overreacting to preseason, did you see the one catch by Kyle Pitts? He looked pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, he's going to be good.
I mean, he's going to be a beast.
My only issue with him is that people are just taking him at his ceiling. That's
right.
I'm trying to draft him and I get him sometimes, but so much less than guys like Hawkinson because just at the end of a tier. So
I
draft from the beginning, the end in the beginning.
In our 15-second timer draft last night, I got him as the tight end 6. I didn't really get to think about it much, but it's nice when he falls to you at the end of that tier. Usually it's TJ Hawkinson, but I think that he's good enough to at least rank inside that top 6. But yeah, I think people, taking him tight end 4, definitely take him closer to ceiling.
Yeah, it will be a fun pick. So yeah. I don't hate it, but in terms of the median outcome, yeah, I think he's more likely than not to be find it tough to beat his ADP by a lot, even if he kind of hits value. So, all right. So those are our quarterback props. Let's go to running back. So we're talking either rushing yards, receiving yards, or touchdowns. So start us off. What running back prop you going with first?
So this one I think I stole from you because I think you're on the same page with this. But DeAndre Swift under 900 rushing yards. He is over his growing injury, it looks like, but head coach Dan Campbell has been saying he doesn't think his conditioning's up to snuff, so he might start the season in a fairly limited role. They brought in Jamal Williams, so I think they're comfortable splitting the work. And honestly, this could end up being more of a 50-50 backfield regardless of when Swift is healthy. So, offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn has made some cryptic comments when it comes to things like that. So I love the under here. And, this Lions team should be mostly in trailing game scripts. So I don't like Swift's rushing upside as much. For fantasy, I still think he's a pretty good pick as, low end RB2 if you can get him in that range because of his receiving upside. So when we get a prop like this, where it's just his rushing yards, I love that because I think his floor is a little bit lower when it comes to rushing yards because of Jamal Williams. Whereas, these trailing game scripts are going to favor his receiving usage. So that's why I love attacking under 900 rushing yards. I would set this lower and put it maybe around 850. I just think when you have a player that's not even entering the season 100%, you tend to downgrade them a little bit more than you would other players. So that's why I love this under.
Yeah, I have it at, let's see, I know I have it even lower than 850. Yeah, I have it around 750. And the reason is there are just so many red flags with Swift beyond just the availability concerns in week 1. Projecting him for an increase in carries is exactly that. It's a projection. He averaged 8.8 carries per game last year. And remember, this is now not the regime that drafted him. So even though, a lot of people are high on DeAndre Swift, and he's a young guy entering year 2, second round pick, 35th overall last season, that was a Matt Patricia pick. That wasn't a Dan Campbell pick. And there's just been a lot of, like you said, cryptic comments and nothing really too positive coming out of Lions camp about DeAndre Swift. So the writing's on the wall, and he would almost have to, he had 521 yards in 13 games last year. So he would have to have a pretty big uptick and stay pretty healthy to get to that number. So I don't think he's going to come close to 1,000 yards this year. I could be wrong. He's a talented guy.
Yeah.
Detroit's line is not half bad at all, but just a lot of things would have to go right. A lot more outs toward the under, lower floor. So I like that one. I'm going with my first one for running backs, Miles Sanders. I'm going under 7.5 rushing touchdowns. And this is a kind of a similar situation to Lamar Jackson, where you look at Sanders and he had 6 scores last year, but one was from 82 yards out and another was from 74 yards out. You cannot bank on runs. You can't even bank on a guy getting that long of a run, period, much less that long of a touchdown run in a given season. So I think that there's going to be some regression there. We don't know exactly what Sanders' role is going to be because this is another team with a new regime. I keep hearing that they're going to keep Jordan Howard around for short yardage, which would directly impact Miles Sanders' touchdown upside. But for his career, if you just want to go back and kind of split the difference and just say, okay, what has he done in his career? He has 9 rushing scores on 343 carries. That is a rate of 2.6%. So he would need 307 carries to get to 8 touchdowns, given his career rate. So you do have some wiggle room, because I doubt Miles Sanders gets anywhere close to 300 carries. I think somewhere in the low 200s is where he's going to end up, even if he plays close to the full season. So I think you have some nice wiggle room here with Miles Sanders and his touchdowns. And this Eagle offense, we still don't know how they're going to utilize Jalen Hurts down in the red zone. So last year, Hurts I think he only had 1 carry inside the 10-yard line. So, we don't know exactly what his role is going to be. There's just a lot of uncertainty, and a guy that really hasn't been a touchdown scorer in his career on an offense that may not be a very high scoring offense. So I like the under 7.5.
Yeah, I love that call. And like you said, he's going to have a lot of competition for the short yardage rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, number 1. Jordan Howard, if he stays on the team, I think he will be the goal line back. And even Boston Scott, for being a tiny back, he's actually been pretty effective in goal line situations. He's scored a touchdown on 4 carries, 4 times on 5 carries inside the 5, which is bizarre because it's such a tiny back, but they have a bunch of different options they could use. So it's the competition that makes my projection for Sanders pretty low. I'm at 6.8 right now, but like you said, there's a lot more reasons to, favor the under. There's a lot more outs. So yeah, love the under 7.5.
Yep. Miles Sanders just he's in a weird purgatory for me in drafts too, right? Like, have you been getting a lot of Sanders in fantasy?
No, but I mean, he is going late enough where, if you get him at the end of the RB2 tier, he's not horrible. But he is going to have to compete with, we already said, Hurts and Howard for goal line scores. Gainwell looks really good as a pass catching back. So we already know that Sanders is going to be limited in that role, but with Gainwell and Scott, it's always been tough for me to trust Eagles running backs, and it hasn't gotten better, but at least his ADP is low enough where I think this time last year, wasn't he like a low end RB1 with, similar concerns, I guess, but if he goes cheap enough, I would grab him, but you're just not expecting him to, go off this year.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of purgatory. Like I said, I have him as the RB24. I like the under on his rushing yards prop at Prize Pick as well. They have it at 1,000. So I have him at 925, and that's with averaging 13 carries per game and 4.6 yards per carry, which is still pretty good. And I still have him coming up about 75 yards short of that. So about a game, a little over a game short. So like the under on his 7.5 touchdowns, like the under on his 1,000 rushing yards. Miles Sanders. Where are you going next, Sean, for running backs?
I'm going under 1,000 rushing yards for James Robinson.
Ooh, we love James Robinson here.
I know, I do too. This line has settled at 1,000 after the post Travis Etienne season-ending injury adjustment, and I think it's a little bit too high, but I'm pretty close, to be honest. He came out of nowhere last year as an undrafted rookie. Only Dominic Rhodes rushed for more rushing yards than him as an undrafted rookie back in 2001. So that's a little bit of history for you. But, this is a new coaching staff. You already mentioned it when it came to DeAndre Swift. This coaching staff, nobody drafted James Robinson, but they did draft Travis Etienne in the first round. So that must tell you something. But, when you look at last year's game logs, the Jaguars literally had nobody to compete with Robinson. They had Ryquell Armstead wasn't able to suit up at all last year, unfortunately, due to COVID. So they had Chris Thompson steal a couple of carries every other game from James Robinson. That was about it. And he's still, he had a great season. He rushed for 1,070 yards. But now he does have Carlos Hyde there, who's absolutely going to take away, a handful of carries a game. So I just think there's a lower floor for Robinson. And if anything, Hyde's going to eat into his rushing work. James Robinson should still be very active as a pass catcher. So I think they'll use him exclusively there and, be a workhorse back. But I still think Carlos Hyde is sort of enough of a threat where, I would put this closer to like 950 yards. This is another prop where I think there's more outs for the under to hit just because there's uncertainty, even though I know we love James Robinson, but still, he's an undrafted rookie with a new coaching regime. I think he's going to have a really good season to surpass this.
Yeah, I have it pretty much on the line at Prize Pick. I am at 986. They're at 1,000, so I don't see as much value in it. I kind of worry about Carlos Hyde. I mean, Carlos Hyde's 31, so I don't know just how much or how effective he's going to be at taking carries away from Robinson over a full season. I mean, Robinson was one of the best players on offense in the NFL last year. So I think there's like a wide range of outcomes, and I would always bet unders on running backs. So I have it 15 yards short. So if I had to choose, I would go under, but Robinson is a guy that I would be interested in some, long shots, seeing what's out there, for some upside.
Like his ceiling, right?
Right. Can he lead the league in rushing yards, something like that? That's how I would kind of attack him. Because I think we might be underestimating him again.
Right. No, I don't want to underestimate him. But if you look, I think he had 10 or 11 games where he had 100% of the carries.
Yeah, he did.
Like, how often do you ever see that? It's so rare, but that's more of how the Jaguars running back situation was last year. It was such a mess that I just think I'm not saying Carlos Hyde is good or anything like that. Just he's going to have some competition. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, I don't want to get in the habit of betting against James Robinson, but just in this case, I think he does have a lower floor than people think. Again, I do like him for fantasy because he still will dominate the receiving usage. I don't think Carlos Hyde's going to factor into that as much. So I still love him for fantasy. I just think his rushing yards is what I'm trying to attack here.
Yeah, where do you have him for in half PPR now, Robinson?
I think RB13, high end RB2.
Yeah, I have him at 16. So like right after that Edwards-Helaire.
Oh, I have him ranked higher than you. See, who's doubting James Robinson now?
I mean, but yeah, it's kind of the same area. There's
like Najee Harris and James Robinson is a coin flip for me, like right in that range.
Yeah, I still go Najee, but I can't really argue with it. I just think, like you said, the Robinson last year just had that huge workload, and I think Najee actually might have a better chance at getting that close to 100% usage this year because Benny Snell. I mean, he might not make the team. McFarland's probably going to be the number 2. Balaj is there, but I mean, they drafted Harris to be at workhorse. So you can't, in my opinion, you can't really go wrong with either of them. You do have to pay a higher premium for Harris. So I do see the point of waiting and getting Robinson a little bit later. All right, let's go to my second running back prop, and I'm going Saquon under 1,075 rushing yards at Prize Picks. And for me, when we've talked about this ad nauseum, there's issues for me with Saquon, not just in the availability, but even if he's out there, also the efficiency, because this offensive line ranked dead last by Pro Football Focus entering the season. They dealt with some guys retiring. No one, if you pay attention to the camp reports, no one's really improved or taken a big step forward. None of the young guys. So I worry about this offensive line and that we might get, some of those games that like only Saquon Barkley is really giving you over the past couple of years, like 13 for 1 or 8 for 10. I mean, that's not a knock on him. It's just the O-line. Sometimes for the Giants, just, it can come and go. They did well at some points last year. Wayne Gallman was a decent, had some decent value, but you combine the health risks with the low floor efficiency wise. And I think Barkley's he probably can't miss more than 1 or 2 games to hit this number. And he has to be pretty efficient, like, 4.6, 4.7 yards per carry. I have him at 4.3. Yards per carry is one of those stats that regresses a lot. It's hard, even if you have a guy with a high yards per carry, that doesn't mean it's going to be that going forward. So I think there are a lot of outs for Saquon to go under 1,075 yards. I have him about 100 short this year.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I was able to get this on Prize Picks when it was 1,200. I would say just like a week ago. So I think the market's catching up. Like, we've been banging the drum that, he's not going to enter the season 100%. He's been pretty inefficient even when he has been healthy. Again, all the blame can be put on the offensive line, Jason Garrett, wherever you want to put the blame, but he has a lot of things going against him. That's why I agree with you completely. And I'm going to piggyback this and say, I also love the under 9.5 rushing touchdowns for a lot of the same reasons, but he's going to have to rely on these long touchdown runs, which aren't really sticky. If there's any running back that can, score a bunch of long touchdowns, it's Saquon Barkley. But again, I do like banking against that. This Giants offense isn't really capable of providing him with a ton of goal line work. And actually, if you look at his career, he hasn't been a good goal line back, which kind of makes sense because he's sort of a home run hitter. He's kind of a high ceiling, low floor kind of runner. So around the goal line, he's struggled. He scored 7 touchdowns on 27 rush attempts inside the 5. That's a 26% rate. Now, granted, you expect running backs to regress closer to the 42% average. And Saquon Barkley is an above average running back, but still his running style isn't really conducive to, goal line situations. So that's why I think taking the under for his rushing touchdowns is also a good bet, because again, you're banking on him, scoring a ton of long touchdowns to hit the over. So that's why I like going against this.
Giants averaged 17.5 points per game last year, second to last in the league. So there just might not be that many touchdowns to go around. I think they'll be improved with Barkley back in the lineup and some of the, assuming Golladay can get healthy, the offense should be improved, but the O-line is still going to be an issue. Daniel Jones hasn't really proven himself as a consistent guy that's going to be able to score you, 24, 27 points week in, week out. So, even if Barkley is healthy, you could have a situation where he falls short of this number. So I like it. I have it closer to 7. So on 231 carries. So it's not like I'm not giving him carries, but I think the touchdown numbers, it's easy to kind of get caught up in the name, but at the end of the day, and again, there was a record high in terms of rushing touchdowns last year. So if that regresses closer to the mean, you also could see a drop. I mean, there was 1.0 rushing touchdowns per game last year. That's the first time that happened since 1985.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like that's that will it keep up? Maybe, but maybe not. And then I feel like that's kind of factored into this projection at 7.5. I mean, at 9.5. That's high for me. Like that's very high. So I like that under as well. So we're fading Saquon. We're still fading Saquon on this pod, as we've been doing all off season long on the Fantasy Flex. All right. So my next one is going to be another very good running back that I think the number is just so high that it gives you some outs, and that's Nick Chubb, under 1,350 rushing yards. That is just a huge number to hit. And if anything happens, like for example, last year Chubb missed 4 games, you're not going to hit that total because again, yards per carry, it takes almost 2,000 carries for career yards per carry to stabilize. Nick Chubb is at 680 for his career, and he's averaging 5.2 yards per attempt. So that is very, very good, but we can't expect him to necessarily even, and I know they have a great offensive line, probably the best in the league, but still that's how unpredictable yards per carry is. There's a lot of variance there. So 5.2 is not what I have him projected for. I have him closer to 4.7, 4.8, which is still, I think, the highest for any running back in my model. So it still loves Nick Chubb, but for him to do that, he's gonna have to pretty much not miss a game and continue his crazy efficiency numbers. I just think there's a lot of outs, and you still have Kareem Hunt here, so you never know what could happen in any given game. Maybe the Browns are winning a little bit, and they end up using Hunt a little more to spell Chubb because they want to keep him healthy for the playoffs. He averaged 15.8 carries per game last year, so that, I mean, for 1,350 yards, you're going to need that mid 5 efficiency, and I just don't think you can bank on that. And at the same time, bank on him to do that and stay healthy for a full season. So going under the 1,350 for Nick Chubb.
I mean, obviously your analysis is sharp there, but I can't go against my boy Chubb. I just can't do it, especially when it comes to rushing yards. So I'm going to stay away from this one. But again, really sound analysis. But I do have him still projected to rush for over like 5.3 yards per carry. Yeah, 5.2 yards per carry. I mean, if you just look at next gen stats, they track expected yards per carry, factor in all the different like things where the linemen are, where the defenders are, and he's number 1 almost every season. So I think he will keep it up, and the offensive line might be even better this year. There's just a lot of reasons to like Nick Chubb. You brought up a good point. Like he's missed time, and Kareem Hunt obviously is a threat. So there's some outs for the under. I just can't bring myself to do it personally.
I get it. I feel like it's not going to be a popular one even among the listeners because, again, you see some of these big names and, good back, good O-line. You're like, all right, I'm not betting the under. But a lot of times these are the ones with the most value because so much has to go right for a guy to get over 1,350 rushing yards to the point where if you like him to do that, again, I think there are other ways to kind of attack, Nick Chubb this season than just going over. So, I'm going under.
All right, next up, I'm taking the under on a running back I love, but AJ Dillon under 690 rushing yards. This is one of those things where I haven't projected pretty close to this, but he has a wide range of outcomes. I mean, are there scenarios where Aaron Jones misses 10 plus games and or AJ Dillon breaks out for 1,000-yard rushing season? Of course. I'm kind of banking on that in some of my leagues that, Dillon will hit his ceiling this year. I think he's crazy talented, but, the most likely situation is Aaron Jones plays in 15 or 16 games, and AJ Dillon finishes under rushing for around 600 yards, I think. So in order to go over this, I think he's going to have to average over 10 carries a game. And I just don't know if we could project that quite yet. And I know that they want to get him involved in the passing game. They did lose Jamal Williams, and they want Dillon to get more involved in the passing game. So I don't think he's going to be just, the change of pace back on the ground. I think they will get him involved in that. But I think this is Aaron Jones' backfield still. I think he's going to dominate the touches. He could, have a career year So I think that's going to limit AJ Dillon. 690 is pretty high for a backup. Again, he does have a high ceiling because if Aaron Jones misses time, he's going over this number, but I think we can bet against Aaron Jones missing, more than 3 games. That's why I think the median is lower than this. I think it'd be around 600. So that's why I do like this under.
Yeah, I have him at 612 and on 139 carries. So I'm right with you. I'm about 60 yards under. You're about 70. Oh no, I'm about 75 yards under. You're about 85. So yeah. It's the median outcome is short of this number, and that's what you're looking for when you make your prize pick entries or enter your props. So yeah, like the Dillon under. Think he has huge upside, but you can attack that in different ways because you can draft him in fantasy. You can, especially in best ball formats, 0 RB or hero RB strategies. Like there's a lot of ways to attack AJ Dillon's upside, but median outcome, still think 690 yards is too high. So I agree. My last one, I'm going for running backs. For my last one for running backs, I am going Darrell Henderson under 850 rushing yards. He would need to average over 50 yards a game if he played all 17 games to hit that number. He's never averaged more than 42 in a season. And with the Sony Michel acquisition, there's a lot of uncertainty here. And also, again, that, he would need to average over 50 in a playing every game. If he misses the 1 to 2 games that running backs normally miss, that's going to go up. And we just don't know exactly how many carries Henderson's going to get on a weekly basis. And, I always like betting against guys setting career highs. That's one of the ways that I kind of attack these markets, especially when in doubt. Or I just like, okay, am I going to bet on a guy to go over something to hit his career high, or am I just going to bet on the under and have all these different outs? And I think the Rams could be a little more pass happy because you have Matthew Stafford and a loaded receiving core this year. So just a lot of different ways. And Henderson he's probably going to be more of the receiving back now because Michel hasn't really played that role. So there's a non-zero chance that both of those guys could stay healthy. And Michel could even end up with more carries. Maybe not a ton more, but he could have, it could be kind of split with Henderson getting the bulk of the receiving usage. So just a lot of ways, I think, to go under this number, not even accounting for, the workload. Because Henderson, he's never really been a high workload in college or in the pros so far. So you're kind of betting against him setting career highs, and I like doing that. So under 850 rushing yards for Darrell Henderson of the Rams.
Yeah, I love this one as well. And, I agree with you when it comes to betting against guys setting career highs, but it does make it tougher knowing there's an extra game this year. Factor that in. But I think that the Sony Michel edition definitely adds uncertainty. It lowers Henderson's floor and ceiling quite a bit, especially in the running game. Like you said, like Michel's gonna eat into his his carries, not his receptions. So that's why I love the under 850 as well.
All right, so those are our running back props. Let's move on to the wide receivers and tight ends. Who you got first for wide out tight end, Sean?
So this is the only one that isn't fun in my opinion because I do want him to have a good rookie season, but that's under on Ja'Marr Chase. 1,025 receiving yards. I had to do it. But, there have been 40 wide receivers drafted in the first round over the past decade, and only 5 of them have gone over this number. Granted, we play an extra game this year. I know that. But, and Chase is obviously considered a top prospect. There's no denying that. But, he did sit out last season, and he has been rusty in camp. So has Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has been rusty. They haven't been able to get on the same page. Ja'Marr Chase has dropped 4 straight passes in the preseason. Again, I'm not overreacting the preseason, but I would love to see him, giving more confidence going into week 1. So I think he could get off to a slow start. But he does have competition too. T. Higgins. I know you love T. Higgins.
Yep.
He's going to have a year 2 breakout. They have Tyler Boyd. CJ Uzoma, apparently the coach wants to get him over 50 receptions.
No, you could have just stopped after Boyd.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think any of those tight ends are going to factor into Ja'Marr Chase's.
That's what I thought. The coach is saying that. But I think he has so much competition. He's not your typical first round pick that goes to a situation where there's nobody there. That's what I'm getting at. He does
Yeah.
have competition, so he's going to need a lot to go right to go over this. And again, we talk about outs. I mean, if Joe Burrow were to miss any time, he's going to go under this as well because Brandon Allen can't support T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase at the same time. So there's a lot of different angles here. Again, I think Chase by the end of the season, I think he's going to be that wide receiver 2 talent that we know. Like he's going to finish strong, but I think the slow start that I'm expecting, I think is going to help us stay under this pace. So I do like the under 1,025 receiving yards.
Yeah, and again, I like what you said about just looking back at first round picks and the median outcome because it's very instructive because you're comparing them directly to guys, with a similar draft pedigree, with similar talent. And, not all of these guys smash in year one. We remember the guys that do. We remember the Justin Jeffersons. We remember the Odell Beckhams. We remember those guys, but there are a lot of guys that have decent to good seasons and they'll fall short of these big numbers that are out there for some of these rookies. I think in general, rookie numbers have been a little inflated across the board here. So I like that under as well. I'm going with Denzel Mims, under 550 receiving yards. Look, he's behind Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Jamison Crowder is going to play in the slot. Keelan Cole can play any receiver position. Mims is behind 4 guys at least on the depth chart. This is a guy who was not drafted by this regime. He was drafted by Adam Gase. So will he average 40 receiving yards a game this year like he did last year in 9 games? I doubt it because he started 8 games last year. So this year, I don't know if he starts at all, just given the New York Jets depth chart, because even he has to separate from Keelan Cole just to become the 4th receiver. And he was running with the third string team at one point in camp. Now, I think that had to do with he was going through some weight loss issues, I believe it was. So I don't think that was I think he's more talented than that. But this Jets receiving core is crowded and there are just a lot of guys ahead of him for targets, and 550 yards. That's not anything to sneeze at. You're still going to have to play as more than the 4th, 5th receiver usually to get that many receiving yards. So I think Mims comes up short of this, and he only played in 9 games last year. He had some injury, some issues earlier in camp, so he also may not stay healthy. We don't know if he'll do that either. So like the under Mims 550.
Yeah, I hate that this is such a sharp play because I think Mims, he's so talented, but this isn't the regime that took him. So, I mean, not to root against your prop here, but imagine if he were to get traded to like the Chiefs or the Saints or something, some other team that will start him. I'd love to see that because I think he is really talented. I think he could be a good starting wide receiver, but I don't think it's happening this year. Like you said, he's sort of a 2nd, 3rd teamer, unfortunately. So yeah, under 550 yards, a lot of things are going to have to go his way to go over this.
Yeah. All right, who we got up next?
So I'm taking Darnell Mooney over 705 receiving yards. I think we're going to see a year 2 breakout for him. He managed to put up 631 yards last year, despite poor quarterback play. And he's very capable of being a deep threat. And that really wasn't unlocked last year at all. He had 27 targets of over 20 air yards last year, which ranked 10th in the league. And only 6 of those targets were catchable. So if you look at all the receivers that had 10 or more targets of over 20 yards, he had the 2nd worst catchable ball rate. So I think it's needless to say, if he has improved quarterback play, which I think they will have with Justin Fields this year, I think they're going to unlock that deep potential that he does have. So he doesn't have to do much to exceed last year's numbers, but I think he's going to crush those. I have him projected over 800 yards. So I love this over here, especially after, they trade away Anthony Miller. The number 3 receiver is sort of up in the air between Marquise Goodwin or Damiere Byrd. Like there's not much competition aside from Allen Robinson. And honestly, Allen Robinson is going to draw double teams. I think it's just going to unlock Mooney even more. So I love betting on Mooney having year 2 breakout this year. That's why I love the over 705 receiving yards.
Yeah, I have him at 66 for 762. So I'm about 60 yards over as well. And I do like Mooney. He was constantly breaking open last year deep, and they couldn't really find him. He'll do some things close to the line of scrimmage as well. They'll need him to. But yeah, he definitely has upside with that deep ball. And you talk about the number 3 receiver, you know who's a dark horse for that role? Rodney Adams. Rodney Adams has been killing in the preseason. You talk like Marquise Goodwin, Damiere Byrd, those guys aren't exactly, entrenched. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Adams be that number 3.
They're probably just going to run a lot more 2 tight end sets, right? With Kmet and Graham.
We think, but who knows, man? I mean, is that really what, like, I don't know if that's better than just having like somebody going deeper downfield, because you got to open things up a little bit. You got Robinson, I think that clogs up the field. I mean, Jimmy Graham did have 8 touchdowns last year. So who knows? Who knows what the Bears are thinking? But remember last year when they got all those tight ends, like at one point, and then they ended up cutting like all of them. So they do love their tight ends. So I wouldn't love
their tight ends.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they got Jesse James there now. So
I think either way, I think Mooney is a lock for 90% routes run per drop back, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how this sorts out, he's going to be on the field.
Yeah, that's what he was doing down the stretch.
Yeah.
And Anthony Miller, a guy who's established, is gone. So yeah, whoever's that third receiver is going to, I think, lag behind and be situational, but Mooney should be on the field pretty much every snap. For my second receiving prop, I'm going with Blake Jarwin for the Cowboys, under 525 receiving yards is the line at Prize Picks. So love putting the under Jarwin in an entry. He would need to average about 31 yards per game to, play all 17 to go over that. He's never averaged more than 23 in his career. And in the Cowboys preseason tune-up, Dalton Schultz, who, remember, had a pretty good year once Jarwin went down. Schultz actually outsnapped Jarwin 12-10 in that tune-up. I have them running pretty much the same amount of routes this season. It's hard to know right now who will run more. There's just been no indication that Jarwin's going to step back in and get that starting role all to himself, especially after Schultz played well last year. And he, he is coming off is an ACL, right?
ACL. Yeah.
He is coming off an ACL, bigger guy. So, there could be a slow start here, and, also don't know about the health. So another guy who would be setting a career high if he went over that 525. I like going under. I just don't think the Cowboys tight ends are they're going to be the 5th target of the 5 on the field at any given point for Dallas. So like the under Jarwin 525.
Yeah, I love that call because, Jarwin probably has the most upside out of the 2 tight ends, but I think people are underestimating how much of a, tight end timeshare this is going to be. I think Schultz really proved last year that, he's a pretty good pass catching tight end. So they'll see what they have in him this year. I think they could be splitting, especially out of the gate. Like you said, Jarwin's coming off an ACL injury. So at least out of the gate, it's going to be more of a 50-50 split. And that could get, him on a rate where he's going to really have to go off later in the season to go over this number. So I love this call as well. And
wasn't Schultz always the better blocker? So the fact that he showed well, like Schultz used to just be that 3rd tight end and like the blocking guy.
Yeah.
But the fact that he showed well in receiving, you could keep Jarwin in that same kind of role he was almost with Jason Witten, maybe a little more than that. But, Jarwin was kind of that receiving tight end that you would throw out there on certain types of situations. But yeah, I think he's going to be situational. So,
and like you said, they're competing with, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. So the targets between the two are going to be few and far between.
Yep. All right, who you got next?
I'm going with Kadarius Toney under 505 receiving yards. He hasn't really gotten in much work at all in camp, which is a bad start because he's the type of player that will need to be schemed up in order to go over this number. He should be a pretty low ADOT kind of player right around the line of scrimmage. He's going to be dangerous with the ball in his hands. So he's the type of player that you kind of want to get integrated in the offense. It's unclear if offensive coordinator Jason Garrett's talented enough to kind of figure out how to unlock a player like Toney. And he could be competing with Saquon Barkley for targets, in that kind of around the line of scrimmage area. So I don't like Toney at all in year one. I think he's going to have has a steep learning curve. Maybe in year 2, he might be integrating the offense a bit more, but 500 yards for a player like him, he's going to have to see way more volume than I'm projecting. So I think, I just don't see how he's going to go over this total, just given the lack of practice time, the lack of just really anything we've seen from him. So that's why I love this under 505 receiving yards.
Yeah, when we were planning out the pod and the which prize pick lines we were going to take, and enter into these entries and talk about, Tony was a guy that I wrote down, and I saw that you already had him. I was like, well, I've already bet Tony. I put Tony in an entry with Brashad Perriman under. So I'm hoping that is still, that Perriman entry is still alive, because I have him with Tony, both unders for receiving yards. And it's a little similar to Mims in that he's definitely going to be on the second string. The plan was to bring him along slow all along. Mm-hmm. And then that, was exacerbated by the fact that he hasn't really been healthy in the preseason either. So he hasn't got much time to practice, hasn't got many reps, first round picks, pretty high draft pick. There is some upside here, but median wise, it's going to take a lot for him to get over 500. And especially Kyle Rudolph is just, started getting back into the swing of things. I know the Giants do want to go to more two tight looks this year. Evan Ingram is a little bit banged up. It got banged up in that preseason game, so we'll see how that goes. But this could be a more of a heavy personnel offense than it was in years past. So that also kind of limits the amount of on-field, just snaps that Tony could get. So, and he could get a lot of his, he could get a good amount of his yardage in the run game too. Like he could get decent yardage this year, and it doesn't all have to come through the air. So yeah, Tony was a guy that I had circled as well. For me, I am going with Dallas Goedert for my third one, under 675. So you look at him with Jalen Hurts, and he was right around, that 39 to 43 yards per game in the 3 starts with Hurts. But Hurts threw for, 350 plus in 2 of those starts. And if you look at the percentage of yardage that Goddard got of Hurts's passing yards in Hurts's 3 starts, because Goddard didn't play in that season finale when Hurts also got benched. Goddard got just 14% of Jalen Hurts' yardage share. Now, Prize Picks has a Jalen Hurts passing yardage prop up that's 3,650. So take 14% of that, and you're at just 517 yards. So again, this Goddard thing is like, it's number one. I don't know how, like if Hurts is going to be extremely beneficial to tight ends. That's why I usually buy low on Ertz, who I think will run the same amount of routes or get traded to a team where he'll be a starter. So I'm kind of fading Goddard in a lot of different ways, and 675 receiving yards, I just think that's too high for a guy that is either going to be sharing the PE1 snaps, or is just going to be on an offense where 3,650 passing yards. It's not a high ceiling offense in terms of yardage. Hurts is going to get a lot of yardage on the ground. He likes to throw off script plays. I think you've talked about that. He likes to go off script, and that usually benefits the outside receivers on the scramble drill. Guys like Smith, Rager. Maybe you'll see Quez Watkins, I think, is making a real play for more targets in this offense, which, receivers were kind of hard to come by at times for the Eagles last year. So, there's just way too much uncertainty to bet Dallas Goedert to get to, I believe that this would be a career high for him too, right? Over 675. Yeah. So
yeah, for sure.
Not the year. I think last year was the year that Goddard, and he actually had more yardage 2 years ago because he played 15 games. Last year he only played 11. So maybe he's even an injury risk. Who knows? But not the year for a Goddard career high, in my opinion. So going under 675.
Yeah, and I mean, we're less than 2 weeks away from the season start, and Zach Ertz is still an Eagle. So I think this prop has dropped significantly. I think it was like around 800.
Oh, wow.
A while ago. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, I mean, we already talked about this. Every day that Zach Ertz is still in Philly, I've been lowering Dallas Goedert's projection to where, it's down around 600 now. it seems like Ertz is there to stay. Like you mentioned, they have other weapons. Devonta Smith should be the number one target this year. Like I already mentioned, Kenneth Gainwell, they should use him in the passing game. There's just too many targets to go around. And this isn't an offense that's going to have a ton of passing volume to begin with. So love the Goddard under as well.
Yeah, I'm around 550, 51 catches, 552 yards, 4.1 touchdowns.
That sounds about right. And I love Dallas Goddard. Like I wanted nothing more than Ertz to go somewhere else and have Goddard unleashed. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's happening.
Yeah, he's my tight end 11. Usually he goes higher than that. So
yeah,
I usually don't get him. But if he falls, I don't hate it. It's just, he's still a top 12 tight end by the rankings, but he's just usually going higher than that. So that's why I'm fading him for the most part this fantasy draft season. All right, last receiving prop. Who you got?
All right, I'm gonna end it with a bang with an Eric Ebron prop.
You mean a drop? End it with a drop?
I am taking exactly. That's why I'm taking the under 500.5 receiving yards for Eric Ebron. So not only does Ebron have to compete with Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, you could throw James Washington in there. Now he has to compete with second-round rookie Pat Freiermuth, also known as Baby Gronk, who has looked, talk about overreacting to preseason, just one more guy, has looked amazing. I thought he might, break out next year, potentially when Ebron's gone, but I think that he's going to factor in this year. So Ebron's, probably going to be splitting playing time with the rookie by the end of the season. So that's why I think there's just multiple outs for this under. You already mentioned Eric Ebron has his drop issues. So give me the under 500.5 receiving yards for Eric Ebron.
Yeah, because when did Vance McDonald retire? Was it at the end of the 2019 season, or was it like early into 2020?
Ooh, I think he may have started last year. Let me look.
I don't think he played it all last year. Or maybe did he? Oh yeah, no, Pittsburgh. Yeah. Oh yeah, he played. Wow, I totally forgot that he played 14 games. But yeah, so that's
much.
Yeah, that's more to my point. It's like Vance McDonald, like Ebron got lucky last year because Vance McDonald, I think, was supposed to be kind of that platoon guy, and he just really wasn't. He didn't live up to that expectation. So I think Freiermuth could actually be more of a true platoon with Ebron this year, especially if Ebron, again, he just has these like maddening drops, and it's frustrating I think they're going to go downfield a little bit more. You pointed out Roethlisberger's arm looks a lot better, but the more they're going downfield, that doesn't really benefit the tight end necessarily either. So Ebron, I have him not too far under actually, because I'm expecting Pittsburgh to bounce back in terms of the passing yardage, like you said. But I think there's a very low floor with Ebron this year because he could get straight up overtaken.
Yeah, like all the hypes with Kyle Pitts, for good reason for these rookie tight ends, but Baby Gronk has looked really good. Any other draft class, like he'd probably have more hype right now, but just I think Kyle Pitts is just absorbing all the hype that we're not hearing as much about him. But Freiermuth had the 2 touchdown games, so I think the cat's out of the bag. But he's just looked so impressive in camp and preseason that I don't see how they keep him off the field as a rookie. So I think that's going to come at the expense of Eric Ebron.
Yeah, man. Ebron, I mean, it's never pretty with him. He had that one big year with Indy, with Andrew Luck, but it's usually frustrating with Ebron. So yeah, I like getting ahead of that and getting on the right side of that frustration. I'll close it out with Adam Thielen under 990 receiving yards at Prize Pick. Thielen's averaging just 55 receiving yards per game over the last 2 seasons. He's missed 6 of 32 games, so 19%. Minnesota, remember, their pass volume could decrease this year because they almost every year under Mike Zimmer have a top 10 defense. And last year they were more middle of the pack. They found themselves in more kind of shootout game scripts. And so I think across the board, you're going to see some regression for this offense, even for a guy like Justin Jefferson. I don't think he gets to 1,400 receiving yards even in 17 games this year. But Thielen was a guy in 15 games. He was at 925 receiving yards. He'll be 31 this year. I just think that there's a lot of ways for him to be short of this total. Justin Jefferson in year one out targeted Thielen, 125 to 108. He played one more game, but he got 475 more yards than Thielen, and that was just in year one for Jefferson. So the split could even grow wider. Minnesota could throw less, and also Kirk Cousins. I mean, and partly due to Jefferson last year, but Kirk Cousins 8.1 yards per pass attempt 2 years ago, 8.3 last year. So it's also, will Kirk Cousins continue to average, 8+ yards per attempt? Who knows? That could also regress. Yeah. So there's just a lot of different ways that Minnesota could still have a better season than they did last year. And the offensive numbers could go down because they don't need it. They don't need Cousins to throw for, 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns this year. They probably don't want to need that if that defense rebounds. And it looks better. There's still, I think the secondary will be better than it was last year. Still some question marks, but overall, I expect Mike Zimmer to get it back to where it's been in the past. So going Thielen under 990.
Yeah, I agree. The defense should be much better. And we know the Vikings love to run the shit out of the ball when they're up. So I agree with that. But are you concerned at all with this Irv Smith injury? He was potentially out for who could be the whole season. Hopefully not. But it could be like the first month. And where do you think those targets are going to go? Do you think Thielen might absorb some of that?
I don't, because I think Thielen's because I already have Thielen still running 90% of the routes per game. I have him missing only one game, like a normal receiver. And I still have him 50 yards short of this, or 40 yards short. I have him at 71 for 950. So, that tells me and that's a pretty optimistic projection. That means that nothing really is going to go wrong. He's going to miss the median one game. He's still going to at age 31 run, 90% of the, be on the field pretty much every snap. So, Smith, the thing about Smith was, yes, he was a guy that was in line for a breakout, but his targets per route run is 15%. And, so we were kind of expecting him to take a jump, but it's not as if, like in my model, Smith still kind of has that, that 15%, like that's his default baseline rate. So he's like, him being out doesn't necessarily change much, because Tyler Conklin, I have him projected at 14%. So there's really only like a 1% additional target increase that I have anyway. And remember, Smith is, the starting tight end is also not going to run as many routes because they're going to block. So I had Smith around 73% of the routes, whereas Thielen's at 90. So it's not really going to affect it too much. I think
just a little for me, because I had Irv Smith's breakout kind of impacting Adam Thielen a bit. So that's why I'm kind of like
gotcha.
considering it. But yeah, Conklin's going to step right in. Who knows who's going to be the second tight end, but if anything, it's just going to hurt Kirk Cousins. Like it won't impact Adam Thielen. It's just going to, Kirk Cousins numbers might dip a bit. So I haven't made an adjustment yet with Thielen necessarily, but I was just curious where you thought that might impact Thielen at all.
Yeah. Tight ends really, they are so like, there's a lot of regression to the mean there. And they're all like, unless you have like a Kelsey or a Kittle or somebody like that, like they're not going to make too much of a difference. Like if you take them out and put in like a replacement level tight end on most teams. And Irv Smith is kind of, even though we like him, he's still like, he was in that like glut of, low end tight end ones for a reason. Like, yeah, like
I get it. But for the Vikings specifically, the tight end's sort of the wide receiver 3, especially Irv Smith. So like, what are they going to run more 11 personnel now with KJ Osborne or Chad Beebe? I just don't know. It just seems like the target tree might get like even more narrow with Irv Smith out. So that's all.
Oh no, absolutely. Like I have them, I have Thielen getting a pretty significant amount of the targets still. It's just this is a low volume team. And they could be lower volume than last year. So I feel good about it, but I see your point. Smith.
No, I'm with you on the under. I was just curious if we should be not overlooking that, but I think we're on the same page that betting against Thielen and sort of the Vikings passing attack taking a big step back is probably the way to go here.
Yeah, it's nuts. Like Kirk Cousins having like one of the best yard per attempt projections in my whole, like he's right there with Mahomes in my, in terms of yards per attempt for me.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Mahomes, Cousins, Tannehill. Like those guys right there at the top. And yeah, it's kind of nuts. So if is Kirk Cousins going to be top 3 in yards per attempt? Maybe. But yeah, a lot of floor there. And Thielen, 15 games last year, but only 10 the year before. We'll see if he can last for an entire 17 game season. So, all right. So 24 props, man, that was, we went in. I always love this episode every year because it really kind of crystallizes some of the last second projections that we're doing. And we'll have our final rankings episode coming out in a couple of days as well. So that should be exciting.
Yeah, I love this episode because we get to talk about player props, and also we're that much closer to getting to watch these players, which is also exciting.
We got that like extra week off between the regular season, but we'll have the rosters. Probably by the time you guys hear this, we'll cut down to 53 and we'll be ready to go. So make sure you go to actionnetwork.com to check out all of our fantasy football and betting content. Of course, we have our fantasy tool where you can leverage Sean and my projections and enter your league settings, get custom rankings, cheat sheets, all that good stuff. And also be sure to download the award-winning Action Network app. You can follow Sean there at @_oddsmaker and me at Chris Raybon. You can also find us on Twitter at those same handles, and be sure to leave a rating and review on the new Fantasy Flex feed. We really, really appreciate it. It's the best way to help us out as we move to this new feed, giving you 5 episodes per week. Once the season starts, we'll grab an Apple Podcast review every week leading up to week 1 and send you guys some swag. And yeah, that should do it. Let's get this money.